started.
Okay.
All right. I'd like to introduce our presenter. Is Keith Cox. He's the co-founder of Seafood Analytics, and he's going to give us a bunch of information on their tools and especially in their use in Bristol Bay.
Hello, I'm Keith Cox. I've met a bunch of you folks before. I wish I was at Fish Expo, you know, running around with everybody, you know, doing all the things that happen there, but not. So hello virtually. I'm in Juneau, and I'm in my little COVID cabin, Seafood Analytics, you know, home office right now. And today I was just going to kind of go over a little bit of history about me, just so you can know where I come from, and then secondly, the project that we're doing that we just completed in Bristol Bay, thanks to the funding with BBRSDA and Mark Buckley, and then how we're hoping to move into 2021 and the project that's going to happen this coming summer. And so a little bit of history about me. I'm a fisheries biologist, and so I have a PhD in fish physiology, and so I look at how fish grow. And then part of my PhD was looking at non-invasive ways to monitor different aspects of fish. And so I looked at using electricity and measuring the electrical properties in fish, and then coming up with different parameters on those, including fats and protein. We were measuring body composition, fat and protein, water weight, dry weight, energy content. And so then we were tracking these things over time. And after graduating from that, I did a postdoc at the Oregon State University Seafood Laboratory, and also at University of Alaska Fairbanks, where we were tracking how much energy it took Chinook and chum salmon to migrate up the Yukon River. It was a really cool project. I held faculty appointments at Sheldon Jackson College in Sitka. Was one of the co-founders of the Sitka Sound Science Center. I was the science chair when the college went under. I've had a faculty appointment at University of Alaska, and more recently, I am an affiliate research faculty at University of New England due to some scallop work that we were doing. I also spent about 6 years working for NOAA here in Juneau at Ott Bay Laboratories, and in that, I was also using impedance to look at measuring, you know, fish quality and health over time. And so to show a little bit of what I've done and how we got into seafood. And so I got into seafood, and so I published this paper when I was at NOAA using electricity as a new way to measure fish condition. And so here's the paper here. I'll be happy to send it to anybody that they want it. And we were mainly looking at health. And so then I started goofing around looking at some post-mortem stuff. What was happening to the cells? You know, cells grow, but then they also die and then they degrade. And so this is really one of the first graphs of looking at fish degradation post-mortem. So this is time in days, and this wasn't a very controlled experiment. We pretty much had 3 pink salmon, and we just left them out, and then we auto-recorded the measurements over time. And then after that, it was kind of like, whoa, that's super interesting, you know? And so since then, that's kind of where the seafood degradation started, and how we learned that we could monitor quality using electricity, which kind of leads into you know, our 2020 Bristol Bay Sockeye project. And so we're working with organizations all over the country and world, actually. And this one's really unique just because of the amount of fish that come through there in a short amount of time. And as all you folks know, that's like one of the roughest, toughest places to try, you know, and get programs going, just because of the volume of fish that are coming through in such a short amount of time. But the purpose of this, using electricity to monitor quality, is really the whole overall purpose is to maximize the value of the Bristol Bay fishery for the benefit of the members that live there, you know, and that's also the communities. And that's also, the processors. That's all the people that are in that region. And something really struck me this morning. We had a Chuck is one of my business partners, and we had a meeting with a guy in down in South America this morning, and they were chit-chatting back and forth. And they said, if you're and I overheard this, I can't remember if it was Pablo or Chuck saying this, but they said, if your quality is good, your fish are going to sell. Period. The end. If your quality is good, your fish are going to sell. And it kind of hit me, and I wrote it down, and I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful. And then they went on to say, you know, branding, marketing, and all that stuff matters, but really it's the quality that matters. And so good fish, good high quality fish is going to sell. But then on the flip side, if we look at this, this balance here, you know, as a fisherman, you know, you've all had the next boat next to you caught more fish and they received more money. And then maybe you've questioned what the quality of those fish were. And so there's a balance between quantity and quality. You can't spend all of your time catching fish and disregarding quality. But then on the flip side of that, you can't spend 100% of your time focused on quality only and not on quantity. Because then, I mean, if you go sell 16 fish that are wrapped in silk, nobody's going to pay you $16,000 or $1,000 a fish. So there's a balance between quantity and quality. You know, we need to work on both of those. And that will improve the quality, keep the quantity up. And so then that should be that higher value for high quality fish should trickle down all the way to the fishermen. And so the purpose of this whole project was to three things: to digitize quality measures and other quality information. If moving data quickly is very powerful, and having digitized data is very powerful, which leads right into number two: drilling down in the data to look for trends. Once your data is in an electronic format and in a form that people can mess with, then you can really drill down and look for trends. Then you can see your highest quality producers, your lowest quality producers, what's happening over the season, what's happening between years. But all that has to be, managed very carefully. We've all had two different Excel sheets that don't match up, and it's really hard to look for trends in Excel sheets that don't match up. And so by digitizing, we can alleviate a lot of those. And then once we do that, what we want to do in 2021 is then identify best handling practices that affect quality the most. And that's also kind of an efficiency thing. Where can we, maximize our efficiencies, to produce the highest quality fish and catch the most fish. And so that's what the whole overall project is. And so the way this happened, here's a unit right here, up in this picture right here, and it's measuring a fish. And here's one on the, that's looks like it's on a seafood line or something somewhere in Bristol Bay. But this is our unit. I'll show you the unit right here too. Now we have a waterproof unit. This is what was out in 2020 in Bristol Bay. We also have small ones that we can measure scallops or shrimp or different things. And then we have one right here that is non-waterproof, but this was the waterproof one. The device was used by Bart Buckley and Digital Observers, and they're the ones that executed on this project. And so thanks to all those guys and those wonderful QA/QC people. Mark trained them super well in spite of COVID and all the nightmares that were going on. We got all the units in their hands, and we did a video training session. Everybody got it, and it worked really well. And so the waterproof unit and the non-waterproof unit have these 4 compression electrodes. And so simply by touching the fish with those compression electrodes, it makes the current go through the fish. And so once we get the current going through the fish, which takes, a fraction of a second, now we know the electrical properties. And once we know the electrical properties, we can plug those into an algorithm and calculate degradation. And then through that, if we know the boat name and the tender name, and digitize that data, and this is already digitized data, and then we blend the two, then we really have a powerful tool that will allow us to, you know, to look at data in a way that we've never been able to in the past. And so if we look at, this is the dashboard. And so what happens is people measure these fish, and then they plug this device into a computer, then the data is pushed up into the cloud, and then it's pulled into this dashboard. And then the data is automatically updated. And so in Bristol Bay, just with this project, we measured almost 7,000 fish on 216 boats and on 5 tenders. And Mark also told me that really the measurements were about a third of what they could have taken just because of the COVID restrictions. Like the QC person had to stay on the same tender. So they had to travel all the way to the processor and back. And so, but we still got a lot of fish. And so if we start to look at the data, here's the quality data over time. And so there was a slight reduction in the quality as we went through the season. You know, all this data, you can also zoom into it, and you can use these buttons right here so you can export those images. If we look at the tenders, and the tenders, we took the names out. And so the company that owns this data has the tender names, obviously, and the boat names. But and so then we made this generic so we could share it with everybody, or they could share it with their fishing fleet. And so here are the 5 tenders right here. And so it looks like they all pretty much had about the same average, except tender number 200 was a little bit higher. And so somebody might want to know why that one was a little higher than the other ones. If we look at the quality levels on the boat level, here are all of those 200 plus boats ranked from top to low, highest to lowest. The black line is an average, the green line is an upper threshold, and the lower red line is a lower threshold. And these thresholds are based on the data themselves. It's like a quality control process algorithm. And so we rank these boats from highest to lowest, and we go from highest, and then there's our average right there, and then we go down. And so it looks like it's kind of skewed down on this end. And so discussions have been made on how we could utilize this data. What is the onboarding so we can really make use of this to improve quality? A possibility might be to reward those above average, and then work on handling practices and identify what's going on the ones that are lower than this. This dashboard could be sent to each individual fishing boat, for example, and then you could be given your number too. And so if you were boat number 301, you know, you could just go to the link, and then you could type in 301, and you could see where your boat is. And then you could see how you rank. And so, and here's the power of this. And so we can see this all in real time. We could do this from last year to this year. And so we can really start to look at things. If we really start to drill down in the data, and here we can look at an individual tender. And this is kind of cool. And so we can look at tender 167, and it will automatically populate all these graphs to only the boats that offloaded to 167 or 129. And so then it gives you a fish count, the boat count. Tender number 129, we measured 2,241 fish over 105 boats. It ranks those boats, again, from highest to lowest on the ones that were offloaded. It gives us a quality trend for that tender overall. It gives an average. And then these are the days that were measured, ranked from highest to lowest for that tender, because the tender didn't receive fish every single day. They had some transport days. And so you might wonder what was happening on day 17 on your lowest day. So then you could simply scroll down to, these aren't in order for some reason, but you could scroll down to, you see what I'm getting at. You could go down to day 14 and you could see what's going on day 14. And this should populate. We're zooming right now, so it'll probably take a second, but it'll tell you all the boats that offloaded on day number 14. I don't know why that's taking so long, but we can blame it on Zoom. But it'll give you a ranking of all the boats that offloaded on day 14. And because we can also measure, there it goes. And so these are all the boats that offloaded on day 14. And so then we could start to piece together why something was happening on day 14 or day 17 or day 27. And you could like look for problem areas. Because we can measure body composition, we put in a body composition trend graph. And as you would expect throughout the season, you know, the fat's going down. And then you can select individual boats that are subsetted from that day that you picked earlier, and then you could do direct comparisons between them. And then if you're back at the plant, you might want to know what your daily numbers of measures taken. You might have a minimum threshold, you know, that you're looking for per day. And so that's really how if we go back to this, how we digitize the quality measures, and then how we drill down in this data to look for trends. And so then the next portion that we're doing, and so I think that was a huge success, you know, thanks to everybody on board, you know, for getting this project done. I think we got some great data. We were able to satisfy what our objectives are. And now we're looking for 2021. In 2021, what we would like to do is add this other quality information into the mix. You guys have all seen the quality slips that are distributed around the tenders in Bristol Bay. And so we're looking at digitizing those. And then now we have even more things that we can compare and more trends that we can look at. And this will really, really help identify best handling practices that affect quality the most. And so if we look at what that's going to look like. And so now imagine your boat pulls up to a tender. Boat pulls up to a tender, ties alongside, offloads the fish. And so now we're using a tablet, an iPhone, or an Android device. And this will work on any of these things. And they would open up a form. And so I'm going to have to stop my share real fast and make sure that you can see this. And so maybe, can you guys see that? I don't know how to tell.
Yes,
if I can.
It looks good.
Okay, perfect. All right, and so you can see this. And so someone pulls up, and so you could imagine having a stylus with an iPad or a tablet, and boat pulls up, you hit a start time, you could have inspector name, we can have inspector gadget on there, confirm time on the CQR, which is our device, confirm the serial number, 1, 2, 3, 4 to make sure they're linked up. Behind the scenes on this form is reference tables. And so the reference table are all the reference table in this case are all the commercial fishing boats in Alaska. And so then I can select the Icy Queen as my tender, my boat name. I can do a search for that, and maybe it's Katrina. It will automatically populate the ADF&G permit number. You can put your fish permit number in there, and then you can go to the quality form. The species, this has all of the FDA marketable fish species as a reference table, but in terms of Bristol Bay, you know, we're pretty much only going to be looking at sockeye. And here's part of the quality slip that you guys see. And then I got Brandy Holberg, who used to work with Icicle Seafoods. She gave me some more questions too. And so, but now you can just simply go through with the fish floating, slide mat, double permit, number bled, number not bled, stop, take 5 CQR measurements. Then you could maybe ask the fishermen, were the fish chilled, or whatever kind of information that you're trying to tie together. Because maybe chilling within 15 minutes matters or not, but that's part of this whole project. But you could ask different questions like, were the fish chilled 15 minutes to getting it on board? Yes. Have all crew members been trained in the correct way to handle fish? No. Does your process include fish drops greater than 12 inches onto a hard surface? Yes, I saw that happen a couple times. And then comments, you could use the microphone button, and then you could enter whatever data you wanted here, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then you can also take a picture of the fish. You can enter your 3 temperatures here. And then you can hit your GPS, and it will take a GPS from your device location, and then you sign it. And then once you sign it, it submits a PDF report that could be printed on the boat, and it works completely offline. And so you could print that on the boat and then hand that to the fisherman, or and that data is stored on the device. And whenever you have cell coverage or you have Wi-Fi, and it can hold 50,000 measurements or something. But once you get into internet capabilities, then it will push all that data and store it as a giant table. So then it's already digitized, and then you can and then the processor can look at it. And so that is pretty much what we're doing, you know. And so how we're working with BBRSDA to, you know, one, digitize quality measures, and now we're trying to bring in this other quality information. And then we want to merge both of those and drill down in the data to look for trends, and then identify the best handling practices that affect quality the most. And then I can imagine what we find out that we could, you know, in 2022, maybe work with BBRSDA again, or ASME to, you know, come up with like how we can train people to most effectively and efficiently use those handling practices to improve quality. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there's it's a small enough group, I can probably just open it up here. Give me a sec. All right. MJ has a question.
Fascinating. Thank you for coming on today and helping us learn a little bit more about this potential. My question is specific to fishing vessels and districts travel time. Is there any correlation between a eugashic fish to a knack-neck fish? I mean, how do you correlate travel time and that sort of thing into the equation?
That's a great question.
Thanks.
And, you know, that would be something that we can try and identify, you know, and so that could be another question. What was your travel time to offload fish? You know, and that's something Brandy, when she was working at Icicle, she looked at that, and like some of the questions, I wish she was on here. She was unable to join today, but some of the things she was looking at is should the processor spend money moving ice to the fish, or should they try and decrease the time, you know, and not worry about ice and get the fish to the buy station? And so a similar thing, it's like, does it make more sense to have more tenders spread out, or does it have, you know, I don't know what the answer to that would be, you know, but region would obviously be another one. Are there differences in regions? And then transport time. And so
okay, as a follow-up, I'd just like to ask if there's any kind of, are you keeping track of how many times fish are pumped, or how they're moved off of fishing vessel to tenders and then from tender to the processing facilities? Double pumped, conveyor belts, method of offloading, I guess, is my question.
That's a great thing too, method of offloading. That'd be another wonderful thing to look at. You know, transportation time and method of offloading. Those should be two things. And it should be noted that that's an excellent question, because it kind of lends me to thinking about, we had a processor in the bay this year, and they were measuring fish shoreside. And so if you had some of these, you know, if you were measuring shoreside also, and you had the measurements from, you know, the tenders, you know, boat to tender and then tender to shoreside, then you could like look at different methods of offloading and then see, you know, if one was more or less beneficial to quality. So I wrote those down. You know, those are awesome.
Okay. We have another question from either Tom or Katie. Is that you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Katie Bursch. Wow, this is really fascinating. I have a lot of questions, but I had almost the same question as Michael had. One of the big questions for set netters, we don't have RSW, so we're a lot of us are dealing with ice and slush ice.
Mm-hmm.
So the big question is it ice? It's ice versus time. So it's like a lot of guys say, "Oh, I'm not gonna ice." It's like, I'm gonna be at the tender in 2 hours at the most. And I think it's better that we just get the fish into RSW as quick as possible and not mess with ice. It's unnecessary. And then other set netters say, "Oh, ice is gonna make my product better when I get there." And I'm not sure that our processors really know the answer to that question. Obviously, they're using the practices they think are the best, but you know, I don't know how much science is out there around that. So if there's any way that this instrument could solve that question, that's a big one across the bay for set netters.
Well, that's exactly what Brandy was looking at, was ice versus time. You know, should the processor send the ice to the fisherman, or try and get the fisherman to get the fish to the buy station faster, you know? And then, you know, even for the gill netters, they were looking at, you know, the temperature bonuses. And so if you're like right next to a tender and then you just pulled your last set, you're not going to get your ice bonus if your fish are at ocean temperature. So then, you know, does it make sense for them to like idle around, you know, put their fish in RSW and idle around till they get their fish down to temp, and then, you know, drive 100 yards and offload them at the tender? And so I think ice versus time is not just for the set netters, you know, but it's for the drift
and
too.
You know, the processors could, you know, it's like making ice is really hard. You need a huge centrifuge and everything. And like I say, they probably already have their answer. They wouldn't be investing all this money in ice. But you know, without ice, you could take that money, if it got proven the other way, and just provide more tenders, so that, you know, every set netter it would be easy for them to deliver in a couple hours or an hour and a half or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and get those fish quickly into RSW. Anyway, very interesting. And then I had a couple questions on what does water soak mean, and what is fat index, just how much fat is in the fish, and does that go down with poor quality, or is that just kind of what you get when the fish returns?
That's just what you get when the fish returns. And so I put it in there just to show, you know, some of the possibilities, you know, like if you were, and that season's so short, but in other seasons, it's like with pollock and cod, we do a lot of work with Trident, and they're the ones that came up with the water soak index, because they were interested in how long the pollock had been in RSW. And so then they were like, "Oh, it would be wonderful if we could look at, you know, water influx into the fish." And so, you know, I think that has to do with, you know, whether they're going to push them into surimi or pollock fillets. You know, it kind of depends on, you know, how much water is in that fish. And then and then, like I said, the fat, that's pretty much seasonal dependent. You know, the beginning of the season, you would expect the fish to be fatter, and then as they get closer to spawning, they're reallocating all those fat reserves, you know, from their body. They don't have to, although they do have more fat on their ventral side, they do have it more dispersed, you know, through their muscle. And then they start moving that fat towards gonad development, you know, and egg development. And so then you see their muscular fat content start to decrease.
So I guess what exact parameter in the fish is telling you if it's good quality or not? Because let's say you're not worried about water index, and your fish, if it arrives in the river with the fat it's going to have, then like what exactly is telling you whether the fish is good quality or not?
So the quality that we're measuring is, and so we measure the electrical properties of two things. And let's see if this will work. Maybe I can do this. Can you see this now?
Yes.
Yeah, and so you have a bunch of cells here. So we're measuring the cells. And then as you know, and so then we have those compression electrodes over here. And so then as the electricity goes from one to the other, it's going around all these cells. And so it's measuring two things. It's measuring all this space in between the cells. And then the second thing it's measuring the cell membrane itself. And so over time, you know, if you leave a fish on deck in the sun, this starts to break, the cell starts to break, and then all the stuff on the inside of the cell starts to flood to the outside of the cell. You know, and so then you're effectively changing this number because it's going away, and then you're changing this number between the cells because you're getting more water coming from the inside of the cells. And then if you were to immediately fillet a fish and then let it degrade, you know, you start seeing drip loss, and you start seeing, you know, a watery product, you know, and it starts collecting in the bottom of the tray or whatever. And that's what we're measuring just at a cellular level. And so we're measuring just the cells. And then as they break, we're losing the cells and we're gaining how much stuff is between the cells, which is the extracellular stuff.
Wow, great. Thank you.
Got a raised hand from Nicholas Dowie.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, thank you so much for the presentation. I've been curious about this for a long time and how it would stack up in the bay, and I'm definitely glad to see some data. Talking about some of the factors that we can control, I'm also wondering about some of the other ones that may be a little bit more difficult that might also elucidate quality. Talking more environmental, say on days where it's blowing over 20 or 30 knots, if that has what kind of impact that has from the scoring side, or on really hot days, maybe not big tidal sweeps, it's been sunny for a week, ambient temperature of the water is 8 degrees more, I mean, and maybe the fish stay in the gear for a little bit longer. Those kind of things that might also play into that baseline of the quality scoring. Do you have any sense on that, or is that something that can be addressed in the future?
Well, I get, that little thing that I showed when those cells were breaking up, I mean, that's a rate function. And so it's, you know, you have a certain number of cells, you know, that are, and there's calculators for that too, you know. So if you have a perfect fish at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, its shelf life is going to be, you know, 16 to 18 days, and you can calculate that out. And that's because those cells are breaking down a certain number per minute, or a certain number per hour, a certain number per day. And then if you add an abuse to that, whether it's heat abuse or stepping on the fish, you know, then it's going to increase that rate, you know, and so then more cells are going to break down in the same amount of time. And so we've done multiple research projects where we had a fish in the sun, and here I can do.
Yeah, let me interrupt you really quick right there. I'm not necessarily talking about abuse by the fishermen. I'm just talking about environmental conditions that are maybe changing that baseline data as far as how it's coming in. If we are talking about this as far as potentially giving premium pricing to individuals that have higher quality. If you have environmental changes that change that baseline, it would be kind of something that we'd want.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
things
yeah,
that
yeah.
might be not quite directly in our control.
Interesting. I never really thought about it. So you have an average, and then you have an upper and a lower threshold, but then you have an event that affects the entire fleet.
Right. So say it's blowing 25 knots, everything's moving around. You have quite a bit more wear and tear on not only us, but on the product as well. So that would be,
oh yeah,
you know, so something that adjusts that baseline that the fleet might not have good control over.
well, that's a good, I'll write that down. Adjustments of thresholds due to environmental perturbations.
Yeah, and if environmental, say you have your ambient temperature, water temperature 8 degrees more, you're starting at a much higher level before you
and that rate would be higher.
So yeah, exactly. And that data should be probably fairly easy backfilled based on the events of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Thing. Let me call you right back.
Yes, actually, and so you could make an adjustment due to environmental perturbations. I'd have to think about that a little bit more, because right now right now the average and the upper and lower boundaries are set by they're set by the data themselves. And so if you had an average, and then if you had a little box, say on the dashboard where you had, you had kind of like a Beaufort scale or something, or it was like you had an environmental perturbation that was 5 out of 10 because it was blowing 35 and it was really affecting offloads. It's affecting the whole fleet. And so then, that would then automatically down adjust the average and the upper and lower thresholds.
Right. And if you were getting a premium price, and it would make sense to go, hey, you know what, I'm going to stop here maybe and do a delivery, even though I don't have a very full load, I'm going to offload these couple brailers and start fishing. Or same thing with heat or anything like that. There might be ways that you can pattern the fleet if they're actually getting rewarded with those extra carrots, that they can make sure to maintain that higher threshold of quality.
Or you could do it the other way. And so instead of adjusting the threshold, maybe you adjust the score. So if your fish come in and they're a 32, but you had this environmental perturbation, and the higher the score, the better the fish. And so across the fleet, everybody got a +2, on that day.
Yeah, however it works.
Yeah, however it works. But so you could adjust the threshold or the score itself.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good ideas.
A question from Mr. Treadwell.
Yeah, hi there. I'm sorry I didn't get to join earlier. I had another call, but I was, Keith, I was actually talking about your venture with a group of angel investors last night. One of the questions came up is similar to what we've just been talking about, which is a former restaurant owner said, I don't care how old the fish is, I just care that it has maintained its quality and has been well cared for. And I guess the question is from the, you can do all sorts of things to kind of tie in, what the weather was at the catch and all that we've just been talking about. But what physically, if I go to the fish in my freezer, as an example, that some have been bought commercial, some of which were caught sport, what am I finding? Am I only finding the age of the fish, or is there anything else that tells me how well the cells have been preserved?
So we did so we can only measure fresh fish right now. And so we have, meaning non-frozen fish. And so we have another product that we're looking at to where we can measure stuff that is previously frozen. And because once you freeze a fish, you start lysing the cells. And that's why a quick cold freeze as fast as possible makes little bitty ice crystals. And so it will not affect, the cell membranes as much as like a slow freeze, like mechanical freeze, like in your freezer. That's why processors freeze better. And so first off, we can only we can only measure fresh fish right now. But what we can do is, if you can do two things, if you can measure the quality of the fish prior to freezing, then you know the quality going in. And then if you can maintain that temperature, maybe using temp loggers, if you know the quality going in and you know that fish was frozen properly and maintained at a certain temperature, it should retain that high quality value, you know, after it's thawed out. And we did a consumer taste test with the Oregon State University Food Innovation Center in Portland. And we did a comparison with 173 consumers, and they did a three-way blind between previously frozen fish and fresh fish. And almost everybody thought that the frozen fish was better than the fresh fish. And it was because it was high quality frozen fish. We measured the fish prior to freezing. It was all frozen within, you know, 5 or 6 days of catch. And that's what we used. And 95% of the people also said that they would change their buying habits if there was an objective measure of quality that was associated with that frozen product. You know, and so I don't know if I really answered your question, but I think we can measure fresh only. And, you know, and so the restaurant owner doesn't care how old the fish is, as long as it's been cared for and maintained. But an older fish, even if it's maintained perfectly, it has a shelf life of 16 to 18 days if it's fresh, you know, and it will start to degrade no matter what. But you can slow it down by taking care of it. And so you can easily have a 12-day-old fish that's in way better condition than a 1-day-old fish if it's been, you know, stepped on and left in the sun. And so hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have one question in the chat from Dan Lesh. He says, what did you see with the huge week compressed run and quality implications this summer?
We looked at that. Chuck picked up on that. And so Chuck, and I'd have to maybe dig through the data, and I don't want to do that in front of everybody, but Chuck looked at that and he was like, wow, what happened right here? And we saw a slight drop in quality. And so then when we looked back at the logs and talked to Buckley, that was when that stuff got crazy. And then you saw, it was pretty remarkable. Then you saw the quality come back up, and it was probably due to everybody, you know, now their feet are wet. You know, we had our first big slug of fish, and so now the efficiency's back there on the tender level and also on the QC level. And so it's not just efficiencies within the fishermen. And so it's like, maybe the QC people were backlogged. But after about 48 hours, you saw the quality come back up, even though that plug of fish was still there.
Thank you so much. Unless there's any questions, we can close this out. It will be recorded and on our website. I'll share it with Keith for him to share as well. So if you came in late or want to share it, it'll be available.
Perfect. Thank you guys for having me, and look forward to working with everybody in the future. If anybody has, and I can also send a link to that dashboard. We can make that available somehow, and I'll let Frances do that, you know. But I can send her a link to that, and then people can monkey around with that and look at the data all they want.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
All right. You have a good day.
You too.